You open your eyes in the morning and something feels wrong. The air in the room seems thicker, the bed heavier against your back, and even the act of lifting your chest to breathe feels like a weight pressing down. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, but what was once a simple action suddenly demands all of your strength. Your feet hit the floor with twice the force they used to, and the jolt sends pain up your legs. You reach for the wall, expecting to steady yourself with ease, but your own arm feels as though it has been filled with stone. The ordinary has become crushing, and the invisible hand holding you to earth has doubled in strength overnight. Imagine this world where gravity is not the familiar constant that shaped every gesture of human life, but instead a doubled pull, an anchor that drags down every bone, muscle, and breath. Walking to the kitchen becomes a test of endurance. Each step sinks your heels harder into the floorboards, and the pressure on your knees and hips multiplies. Chairs creak when you sit, and lifting a simple glass of water becomes an exercise your arm struggles to complete. Breathing itself is more demanding because the muscles of your chest cavity must rise against a doubled downward force, and even the blood in your veins strains to climb against a heavier pull. The body is built for a single earth, not a doubled one. Humans evolved with skeletons sized for a specific load, hearts tuned to pump against a set resistance, and muscles balanced between efficiency and strength. In this new world, every compromise collapses. The spine bends more, joints grind faster, and the delicate balance of circulation falters. Your own weight doubles, not in fat or mass, but in the pressure gravity places on you. Someone who weighed 70 kilograms yesterday now presses down on the ground with the force of 140 kilograms today, without gaining an ounce of tissue. The consequences ripple outward. Children cannot run freely, their growing bones bent under strain. The elderly crumble faster, their brittle joints unable to withstand the punishment. Athletes, once symbols of endurance and strength, fall as their muscles fatigue far sooner than they ever did. Hospitals overflow within hours of this sudden shift, and the infrastructure of daily life begins to crack under the pressure. Now imagine the animals that live among us. Dogs attempt to leap onto couches, but fall short, their bodies unable to fight against the doubled pull. Birds, so finely tuned to the ratio of wing strength and body weight, cannot even lift themselves from the ground. Insects that once sprang effortlessly now crawl slowly, their legs unable to hurl them into the air. Entire categories of movement vanish from the natural world. Even the simplest tasks, like carrying groceries or climbing a set of stairs, demand monumental effort. The human body sweats, strains, and groans under the load. Bones fracture with impacts that used to be trivial, and exhaustion strikes like a shadow in every activity. A day in this heavier world feels like a week in the one you knew before. The sense of freedom in movement is gone, replaced by a constant negotiation with the planet itself. But the change is not limited to flesh and bone. The built world, too, begins to show its weakness. Bridges designed for cars of one weight now buckle under doubled pressures. Buildings sag, tested in ways no engineer intended. Elevators groan, escalators stall, and even the simple act of climbing a ladder becomes a feat requiring courage and stamina. Vehicles consume more fuel as their engines fight to carry doubled burdens. Life itself becomes slower, heavier, and more dangerous. Every journey stretches longer, every action takes more thought, and the world feels not simply altered, but rewritten by a force no one can resist. Humanity is a species that adapts, but this sudden transformation leaves no time for adaptation. The question is not whether people can adjust across centuries of evolution, but whether they can even survive the next few days. As the hours pass in this imagined scenario, you begin to see how completely gravity defines existence. It is not just the weight of your body, but the rhythm of your heartbeat, the stride of your walk, the arc of a thrown ball, the stretch of a tree branch, and the very curve of a mountain. Gravity is the silent architect of everything. To double it is to demand that all of Earth's design be rewritten. Yet this opening glimpse is only the start. What happens in your room, your street, or your city is a microcosm of what happens on the entire planet. Seas shift, winds change, and the very shape of landscapes begins to evolve under the doubled hand of gravity. For the moment, we remain focused on the immediate, the crushing impact on the body, the simple collapse of daily life. But the deeper truth lies beyond the individual experience. Gravity is not just the challenge of moving your limbs or breathing your lungs. It is the master force shaping planets, climates, and civilizations. And so, as the world grows heavier in this thought experiment, we must look further than the struggle to rise from a bed or climb a staircase. This doubled pull is not a temporary discomfort. It is the foundation of a new world. Soon we will step back to see how this force reshapes not only people and animals, but the very environment that surrounds them. The hours stretch into the day, and the consequences of a heavier earth unfold everywhere you look. Streets that once buzzed with motion now crawl at a sluggish pace. People lean forward with effort, dragging their doubled bodies along sidewalks, pausing to rest at corners where they once would have hurried across. Cars sputter and strain, their engines working overtime to move what is now effectively twice the load. Even bicycles become burdens, the once simple push of pedals now a task that leaves thighs burning after only a few revolutions. Inside homes, the world reveals its fragility. Chairs splinter more easily, tables sag under the doubled weight of dishes, and beds groan with pressure. Elevators that could carry 10 now break with the strain of 5. Everyday technology fails, not from poor design, but because it was calibrated for one Earth, not two. Glass shatters more frequently when dropped, because it meets the floor with greater impact. Smartphones slip from hands that are suddenly less steady and fracture more easily against unyielding surfaces. The fragility of modern convenience becomes clear when the very force of nature is turned against it. Your own body continues to struggle. Climbing stairs feels like scaling cliffs. Each muscle contracts with effort, only to be dragged down again. The breath that once came in steady rhythm now arrives in gasps, each inhalation resisted by the weight pressing on your chest. Even lying down provides no relief, as the pressure of gravity bears down with relentless insistence, compressing organs, straining ligaments, and reminding you that there is no escape. Sleep itself is restless, punctuated by tossing and waking as the body seeks comfort in a world where comfort has vanished. Consider the wider living world. Cats leap from counters and fall short, their grace stripped from them. Horses stumble beneath the doubled strain of their own frames, unable to run with the beauty they once possessed. Birds attempt to launch skyward and collapse back to earth, wings fluttering helplessly against an unforgiving pull. The natural ballet of movement that defined Earth's ecosystems falters and slows. Even plants feel it, their stalks bowing lower, their branches breaking more easily, their roots fighting harder to anchor against the increased drag of their own weight. In such a world, accidents multiply. A trip on the sidewalk results in broken bones rather than bruises. Children who once played freely now cry from falls that would have been harmless yesterday. The elderly, already fragile, collapse under the load of simply existing. Hospitals, already strained, overflow with the injured. Doctors race to respond, but they too are slowed, their bodies pulled down by the same implacable force. The tools they use are heavier, their movements clumsier, their energy drained. A world that once balanced precariously on systems of health and order now begins to tilt toward collapse. The mind also suffers. Where once there was a sense of freedom in motion, there is now a constant awareness of struggle. Joy in running, dancing, and climbing is replaced by fear of falling, dread of fatigue, and the constant calculation of whether an action is worth the pain it brings. People retreat indoors, not from weather or danger, but from the sheer exhaustion of facing a doubled world. Depression spreads as surely as injury, a silent burden added to the visible one. Yet humans are not the only victims. Entire ecosystems falter. Predators cannot chase prey, prey cannot escape, and the balance of survival collapses. The cheetah that once sprinted across plains cannot accelerate fast enough, its muscles giving way under doubled strain. Gazelles that once bounded to safety now stumble and fall. Even insects, the smallest of creatures, find that flight consumes more energy than their tiny bodies can generate. The skies fall silent, and beyond the living world lies the planet itself. Oceans do not rise instantly, but their waves strike harder, their tides pull stronger. Rivers run with greater force, cutting into soil more deeply, eroding banks more rapidly. Storms gather heavier clouds, rain falls with greater impact, and winds gust with punishing strength against bodies that can no longer resist them. The very landscape seems to sense the change, as if Earth itself is shifting under its new load. In this imagined world, gravity is no longer the quiet companion humanity has always ignored. It is now a tyrant, one that dictates how you move, how you work, how you think, and even how you dream. You feel its presence in every heartbeat and every breath, in every strained muscle and every aching bone. It is not an invisible background force anymore. It is the protagonist of life, shaping every choice and every possibility. Yet this is only the beginning of the thought experiment. We have seen how one day, under doubled gravity, would crush the familiar rhythm of existence. But what if it had always been this way? What if humanity had never known the lighter world and had evolved under such a weight? What forms would bodies take? What societies would emerge? And what landscapes would rise beneath a doubled sky? The answers to those questions lead beyond immediate catastrophe into the deeper truth of how gravity builds the world from the ground up. The third day dawns in this heavy world, and you already sense how quickly the familiar slips away. Streets remain quieter, not because people are absent, but because they move in slower currents, bent forward, bodies dragging themselves into routines that no longer fit. The sound of the world changes too. Footsteps echo more heavily, collisions produce sharper cracks, and voices carry differently through air that feels denser against the skin. Even laughter is rarer, replaced by grunts of effort and sighs of exhaustion. The longer you remain in this doubled pull, the more invisible costs reveal themselves. Blood struggles to reach the brain, and dizziness becomes a constant companion. Simple head movements bring fainting spells. The heart, which once pumped tirelessly, now labors against a doubled resistance, and chest pains become common across all ages. Medical science scrambles to invent braces, supports, and drugs that might help the body withstand its own weight. But the problem is deeper than medicine. It is woven into the very design of the human frame. Humanity was built to dance under one pull of earth, not two. Cities themselves begin to fail. Bridges crack under loads their builders never calculated. Roads split more frequently as vehicles carve deeper ruts into asphalt. Subway systems stall as escalators and elevators break, leaving stairs as the only option in a world where stairs are now mountains. High-rise towers, once symbols of ambition, reveal hairline fractures in their steel, while ancient monuments that endured centuries now crumble in weeks. Civilization looks suddenly fragile, its marvels toppled not by war or time, but by an increase in the very force that holds the planet together. Industry groans beneath the new demands. Trucks consume double the fuel, airplanes cannot take off, and ships ride lower in water as their cargo presses down more fiercely. The economy stumbles, supply chains break, and hunger spreads as food becomes harder to transport. Farmers find plowing impossible without engines that consume more fuel than they can afford. Even seeds, pressed deeper into soil by heavier rain and denser earth, struggle to sprout. The promise of abundance narrows into scarcity, and survival itself begins to feel precarious. In homes, the human spirit still searches for adaptation. Families shift to eating simpler meals because lifting heavy pots and pans becomes arduous. Children play quieter games, rolling balls instead of throwing them, drawing pictures instead of running outside. Music changes tone, with drums striking deeper, slower beats that match the pace of bodies moving under pressure. Entire cultures begin to reshape in real time, reflecting not aspiration for what once was, but resignation to what is now unavoidable. But there is another layer to this story. As catastrophic as it feels to suddenly double gravity, there is also a sense of awe when you pause to consider the sheer power of the force itself. Gravity is not a storm that passes or a fire that burns out. It is the constant, the sculptor of planets, the shaper of stars, the invisible hand that curves space and bends light. To feel its strength doubled is to realize how delicate existence always was, how finely tuned every step of evolution and every piece of human ingenuity had to be. If such a shift occurred overnight, survival would seem unlikely. Yet if such a force had ruled Earth from the beginning, the world might not be broken, but simply different. Evolution would have sculpted shorter, sturdier creatures. Forests would have grown with thicker trunks and shallower branches. Oceans might have been calmer, mountains lower, skies denser. Human beings would never have known the freedom of leaping or running as we do, but perhaps they would have mastered other strengths, other ways of thriving in a world that is harder and heavier. And so the thought experiment expands. The first glimpses have shown us how doubled gravity destroys the familiar and reshapes daily life. But the real question lies deeper. What would Earth look like if gravity had always been this way? Not an accident of overnight change, but the fundamental rule from which everything else follows. To answer that question, we must leave behind the image of humans stumbling in present cities and imagine instead an entirely different history, one that begins with the very first cell and stretches through evolution, climate, technology, and culture. The world made heavier is not simply our world broken, it is an alternate Earth altogether. The next step in this journey is to understand how bodies would have been built from the start, how life would have risen under the doubled hand of gravity, and how existence itself would have taken a different shape. Gravity has already shown its power to crush the present, but it also has the power to rewrite the past and imagine another future. From the moment life emerges under a heavier sky, the human body must confront challenges far greater than anything known in the lighter world. Muscles that were once enough to lift, run, and climb now strain against a doubled pull, and bones that could support leaps and falls are constantly on the edge of fracture. Imagine standing upright in such a place. Your skeleton is forced to act as a permanent scaffolding under stress, each vertebra grinding more heavily against the one below, each knee bending with a load meant for two. The elegance of upright posture becomes an endurance act, and survival itself demands a redesign of flesh and bone. The first thing to falter in such a body is the skeleton. Our bones are miracles of engineering, balancing lightness and strength, latticed inside with trabecular structures that give both resilience and flexibility. But those lattices were sculpted for one Earth. Under double, the compression is relentless. Spines curve forward into stoops, hips wear down early, and every step lands with punishing force. Fractures become common, not from falls, but from simple twists or jolts. The evolution of humanity in this heavy world would therefore demand thicker bones, denser calcium deposits, and shorter limbs to minimize bending stress. Instead of the tall, upright figures that once strode plains, humans here would be compact, stocky, with skeletons closer to pillars than frames. Muscles would tell a similar story. Every action, even standing still, requires greater contraction to resist collapse. Calves bulge wider, thighs thicken, and arms become rope-like cords of strength. In time, these muscles would dominate body shape, creating a humanity built not for elegance, but for sheer endurance. Running would fade, replaced by slower walking with careful steps, while jumping might disappear entirely. Energy that was once used for speed would instead be devoted to constant stability. This would be a species that grows powerful in appearance, yet every movement still costs far more energy than in the lighter world. The heart, though, faces the greatest trial. Blood does not rise easily when gravity presses twice as hard, and the vessels that carry it stretch against strain. Fainting becomes frequent as blood pools in legs, and strokes or clots rise in frequency as pressure damages the brain's delicate supply. The heart itself grows larger, its walls thickening to push harder, but such adaptation has limits. Evolution might favor lower stature, simply because shorter distances from foot to head make circulation less costly. A humanity built under such weight would likely be compact, not only in muscle and bone, but in overall height, a race of shorter, broader figures designed to keep blood moving with efficiency. Even breathing shifts. The diaphragm and chest must labor to lift against doubled force. Lungs themselves are compressed, and so the air exchanged with each breath is less. This would demand more powerful chest muscles, a wider rib cage, and perhaps slower, deeper breathing rhythms. Oxygen delivery is everything for survival, and so bodies would adapt by carrying more red blood cells, or by evolving lungs with greater surface area to capture every molecule. The cost of life here is written in every breath, a constant negotiation with gravity just to stay conscious. Yet the greatest toll falls on the joints. Knees, ankles, hips, and shoulders grind faster, cartilage erodes earlier, and the lifespan of joints shortens dramatically. In the present world, arthritis creeps in with age. In this heavier world, it would strike at youth. To survive, bodies evolve with thicker cartilage, tighter sockets, and movements limited to stability rather than flexibility. The grace of gymnastics, dance, or sport is traded away for sturdiness. Childhood play would look more like cautious crawling, with leaps and spins almost unimaginable. In the end, The human figure in this alternate world is one of compressed resilience, shorter, broader, denser, and muscular, with hearts like engines and lungs like bellows. The elegance of our lighter form is gone, but in its place stands a body engineered to resist collapse in a hostile pull. Humanity adapts, but in adapting, it becomes something different entirely. And so, as we imagine the strain of doubled gravity on the individual, we see only the beginning. For if humans evolve into pillars of strength, so too must every creature. Evolution itself bends under this pressure, shaping the entire biosphere into sturdier, smaller, denser forms. The heavy world sculpts not only people but plants and animals, rewriting the story of life itself. The strain of doubled gravity is not only written in bones and muscles, it presses itself into every hidden system of the body. Imagine the veins in your legs, already fighting against one pull of earth to lift blood upward. Now that battle is doubled. Valves that once clicked open and shut with precision begin to leak. Blood gathers in feet and ankles, swelling them painfully, and clots form with dangerous ease. A single step demands more circulation than a sprint once did. The nervous system struggles too. Every signal sent across the body must travel in a frame that tires more quickly, with muscles demanding constant attention to remain upright. Reflexes slow as energy is drained, and coordination falters. A stumble that might have been corrected instantly now leads to a fall. In a doubled world, reaction time becomes survival itself, and evolution favors those with tighter, faster responses. Yet even sharp reflexes cannot erase the constant wear, and the body lives under a permanent tax of exhaustion. The skin bears marks as well. Pressure against beds and chairs grows harsher, creating sores where none appeared before. Hands callous faster, shoulders bruise more easily under straps of bags or clothing. Human design becomes visibly rougher, its surface molded by friction with the world. Nails thicken, hair grows more coarsely, all part of an adaptation to resist the strain of living in an environment where even stillness is a challenge. Sleep changes under these conditions. The body, pressed down against mattresses, struggles to shift position, and every turn is interrupted by aches. Dreams fade into shallow cycles, interrupted by discomfort. Over generations, evolution might sculpt deeper sleepers, bodies that sink into oblivion despite pain, because the mind requires rest, no matter the burden. But in the immediate, sleeplessness adds to exhaustion, and exhaustion adds to collapse. For children, the story is harsher still. Growth is stunted by gravity's grip. Bones curve more easily, spines bend earlier, and height becomes a rare luxury. Children who might have grown tall in another world stop at shorter statures, their frames settling into compact forms before adulthood. Play is quieter, less daring, shaped by the risks of jumping, running, or climbing. Laughter is tinged with caution, and childhood becomes an age of careful endurance rather than wild exploration. The elderly, already weakened by time, pay the highest price. Fragile bones snap, brittle cartilage grinds, and hearts collapse under the doubled work. Life expectancy shortens dramatically, not because of disease or famine, but because bodies cannot withstand the punishment of their own weight. In such a world, reverence for the aged might be deeper, for their survival is rarer. Each year lived a triumph over the crushing sky. Across generations, these pressures etch themselves into evolution. Humanity becomes not only shorter and stockier, but entirely reshaped. Fingers grow thicker, useful for gripping under strain. Feet widen to spread weight more evenly. Skulls thicken to protect brains that face constant risk from falls. The heavy world creates heavy people, molded by necessity into sturdier, denser forms. But these adaptations come at a cost. Speed, agility, and fine dexterity fade. The violinist's delicate movements, the dancer's leaps, the runner's sprint, all vanish under pressure. In their place rises a humanity of endurance, strength, and cautious motion. The culture that grows from such bodies would reflect these traits, praising resilience more than elegance, persistence more than beauty. This chapter of evolution is written not only in bones, muscles, and hearts, but in every gesture of daily life. And if humans must be remade so profoundly, then all other creatures must be remade as well. Insects, birds, mammals, trees, none escape the doubled pull. A planet that drags twice as hard creates an entirely different menagerie of forms, a biosphere sculpted not by grace, but by gravity's unyielding grip. The longer you imagine life under doubled gravity, the clearer it becomes that every part of the body lives in quiet rebellion. The skeleton may adapt with thicker bone, the muscles with greater bulk, and the lungs with wider cages, but there remains no escape from the constant struggle. Even digestion changes in subtle ways. Stomachs and intestines are pressed downward with greater weight, food moves more slowly, and discomfort grows common. Constipation, bloating, and hernias appear with greater frequency, forcing the body to evolve sturdier abdominal walls and stronger sphincters just to process a meal. Reproduction becomes a more delicate matter as well. Pregnancy places immense strain on mothers in the lighter world. Yet here, every kilogram of fetal weight presses twice as fiercely on the spine and hips. Miscarriages and complications would be more common, and only those with exceptionally strong pelvic structures might survive childbirth. Over centuries, evolution would select for broader hips, lower centers of gravity, and perhaps shorter gestation periods to reduce maternal risk. The miracle of birth itself would be reshaped by gravity. Immune systems also face indirect trials. Wounds are more severe, since falls cause deeper tissue damage, and the circulation struggles to deliver immune cells where they are needed. Infection spreads more easily through swollen limbs where blood pools, and recovery times extend. Adaptation would push toward faster clotting, denser skin, and immune responses tuned for constant battle. Even the simple scrape of childhood becomes dangerous when the body is already overwhelmed. Mental health bends under the pressure too. The nervous system adapts to slower, heavier movements, but the mind remembers freedom. In this heavy world, frustration and despair linger. The effort of living can overshadow joy, and societies might need to cultivate rituals of patience, resilience, and communal support just to endure. Depression and anxiety become widespread unless offset by cultural evolution, by philosophies that frame heaviness as natural rather than cruel. Perhaps entire religions would be built around honoring the struggle, treating survival itself as sacred. The costs of doubled gravity are immense, but they carve a humanity that is not weak, only different. People of this world are stocky and broad, with endurance that astonishes. With bones and hearts designed for constant strain, they may not run fast, but they can carry immense weight, slowly and steadily. They may not leap, but they endure falls that would break the lighter people of another earth. Beauty itself would be redefined, admired not in height or agility, but in stability and sheer resilience. And so the picture of humanity in this world emerges: shorter, denser, sturdier, with thickened joints, broad chests, wide feet, and powerful hearts. A species molded by gravity, built to resist collapse, enduring every moment under the doubled sky. These are bodies pressed into new forms, still undeniably human, yet no longer the same as those who walk the lighter earth. But the story does not end with human anatomy. For while we may imagine the strain on our own frames, the truth is that every plant and animal would be sculpted in parallel. Evolution in a heavy world is not a tale of humans alone. It is a story of entire ecosystems, where trees cannot grow tall, birds struggle to fly, and creatures of all shapes are pulled into new designs. The landscape of life itself bends, forever marked by the doubled hand of gravity. The story of life under a doubled pull does not begin with humans. It begins with the first spark of biology, with the earliest cells rising in oceans pressed harder against the seafloor, with every form of life sculpted over eons by the relentless hand of gravity. Evolution is a constant negotiation between environment and adaptation, and in a world made twice as heavy, every branch of the tree of life grows differently. Start with plants, the architects of landscapes. On the lighter Earth, trees stretch high into the air, building great trunks that carry branches skyward to capture sunlight. But in a heavy world, height is punished. Every meter of growth adds weight that roots must resist and that trunks must bear. The tallest redwoods of our forests could never exist. Instead, trees are shorter, broader, and denser. Their branches remain closer to the ground, their trunks thicker than towers of stone. Forests look less like sweeping cathedrals and more like squat fortresses, with canopies hanging low over the earth. Roots drive deeper, anchoring against the doubled pull, and leaves thicken to resist tearing under heavier rains and winds. Grasslands too change shape, with blades growing sturdier, almost woody, in order to remain upright. Animals evolve in harmony with these new landscapes. Insects, those tiny pioneers of movement, are among the most dramatically reshaped. In the lighter world, wings beat fast enough to hold them aloft, but in this doubled world, flight is costly. Only the smallest species can still hover, and even they do so for brief moments, before exhaustion drags them back. Most insects abandon flight altogether, evolving into ground dwellers, with powerful legs built for crawling rather than leaping. The air, once alive with buzzing and fluttering, grows quiet. Birds face the same trial. Feathers, wings, and hollow bones may grant flight in a lighter sky, but here, every attempt is drained of energy. Small birds might glide short distances from tree to tree, but soaring across vast skies is impossible. Large birds never evolve at all. The skies belong instead to the winds, empty of wings. Where birds fail, some species adapt differently, trading wings for digging claws or gliding membranes that let them slip short distances between branches. But true flight, that symbol of freedom, never defines this earth. Among mammals, the changes are profound. Tall, lanky forms like giraffes or horses are unsustainable. Legs too long break under their own weight. Necks too extended collapse circulation. The successful mammals of this heavy earth are stocky, with low centers of gravity and compact shapes. Picture a world of creatures built like bears or boars, solid and muscular, moving steadily rather than swiftly. Even predators cannot afford the explosive chases we know. Instead of pursuit hunters, they become ambushers, relying on patience and power rather than speed. Evolution favors stealth, endurance, and raw strength. Reptiles too shrink in scale. Dinosaurs of towering height could never have ruled here, their frames too fragile under the doubled burden. The giants of our fossil record never rise in this alternate timeline. Instead, smaller, denser reptiles dominate, with squat bodies hugging the ground. The age of giants never dawns, and Earth's evolutionary path narrows to sturdier, more modest scales. Water offers some refuge. In oceans, buoyancy eases gravity's grip, allowing creatures to grow larger. Yet, even here, the effects are felt. Bones and shells grow thicker, muscles denser, as the doubled pull still drags from above. Fish swim with slower strokes, conserving energy, and whales never reach the colossal sizes known in our seas. Life underwater is larger than on land, but even it is trimmed and compacted by the rule of gravity. Over millions of years, an entire biosphere arises under these laws. The creatures of this world are not weak, but shaped by necessity. They do not leap, soar, or tower, but they endure, squat, and sturdy, moving with patience. Predators stalk, prey cling close to ground, plants anchor like fortifications, and insects scuttle, rather than buzz. The heavy world creates not less life, but different life. A planet filled with resilience instead of grace. And as this life evolves, the stage itself changes. Landscapes in a doubled world are not the same. Mountains, rivers, and skies all bend to the pull. Before we step into those altered terrains, we must pause and realize the truth. Gravity is not simply a condition of existence. It is the author of every form, every gesture, every possibility of life. Double it, and you rewrite the script of biology, from the roots of forests to the wings of birds that never take flight. The biosphere of a heavy Earth continues to reveal itself as a place both alien and strangely familiar. Picture a plain where herds gather, not of tall, fleet animals, but of compact creatures built like moving boulders. Their limbs are thick, their torsos barrel-shaped, their strides deliberate. They graze on low, tough plants that have adapted to the doubled pressure of wind and rain. These animals cannot flee in great leaps or outrun predators in bursts of speed. Instead, survival depends on forming tight groups, presenting walls of strength rather than scattered, fleeing bodies. Predators that stalk these herds are not swift sprinters like the cheetahs of our lighter world. Instead, they wait in shadows, conserving energy, ambushing with crushing strength when the moment is right. Their jaws are wider, their bodies shorter and heavier, their tails stiffened to help them balance in sudden lunges. The chase is replaced by the grapple, the long pursuit by the close struggle. The balance of power between predator and prey changes, and entire ecosystems shift toward endurance and strategy rather than flight and pursuit. Forests echo with similar transformations. Without tall trees, the canopy lies lower, creating a dense, shaded world where sunlight filters through thick leaves that are broad and leathery. Climbing animals do not swing easily from branch to branch as monkeys do in the lighter earth. Instead, they grip with powerful arms and stocky torsos, moving slowly, always testing each hold. Falls are more dangerous here, so evolution favors caution over daring. Even the smallest mammals cling tightly to bark, their tails coiled like anchors. Insects crawl in endless armies along trunks and roots. Wings are reduced, and mandibles grow stronger, jaws designed to cut through denser vegetation. Some evolve shells thicker than armor to resist the punishing pressure of predators or storms. Where dragonflies once filled the skies with delicate flight, beetle-like creatures now dominate, heavy and grounded, their exoskeletons as much fortress as frame. The absence of birds reshapes the world in unexpected ways. Without flocks to carry seeds across continents, plants evolve different strategies. Fruits fall heavier, rolling short distances, or attached to animals with tougher burrs that cling to fur. Pollination is dominated by crawling insects rather than hovering bees. Forests spread slowly, methodically, their growth bound to gravity's leash. The skies, once filled with song and movement, remain quiet and heavy, the silence broken only by winds and storms. Amphibians thrive in this niche world. Frogs that once leapt high into the air now stay close to ponds, their legs shorter, their bodies thicker, croaking from the edges rather than vaulting into grass. Salamanders grow larger, their squat shapes well suited for this pressurized existence. Wetlands become lively places, filled with creatures adapted to both water's buoyancy and land's punishing weight. Marine life holds the last echoes of gigantism. In the seas, buoyancy offers relief, and their evolution still permits size. Yet the giants of this heavy earth remain smaller than the whales or colossal squids of ours. Even here, muscles must work harder, shells grow thicker, and bones denser. The result is an ocean filled with powerful swimmers that move with careful efficiency, never wasting energy in playful leaps above the surface. Through every niche, gravity leaves its mark. The creatures of this world do not look fragile or weak. They look as though the planet itself molded them, pressing their forms into sturdier, denser, and more grounded shapes. A squirrel-like creature is closer to a burly climber than a nimble leaper. A grazing herd is closer to a fortress wall than a field of sprinters. Even predators resemble wrestlers more than runners, their strength compacted into bodies built for grappling. This is not a world of grace, but of resilience. It is a biosphere where survival means resisting collapse, and every adaptation is a compromise with weight. The balance of ecosystems is slower, heavier, more deliberate. Energy is hoarded and spent carefully, for the doubled sky punishes extravagance. Life thrives not in leaps or flights, but in patience, caution, and solidity. And yet, despite these changes, the essence of life persists. Evolution still finds a way to fill every niche, to sculpt diversity from hardship. Forests still breathe, herds still graze, predators still stalk, and oceans still teem. The difference is only in form, a reminder that gravity is the silent partner of evolution, shaping not only the survival of species, but the very possibilities of what life can become. The landscapes that cradle this life are altered too, for gravity not only presses on bones and trunks, but on stone itself. Mountains, rivers, and skies bend under its doubled pull. To understand the heavy world fully, we must now turn our eyes to the ground beneath our feet and see how the face of Earth itself is reshaped. The imagination stretches further into the distant past of this heavy Earth. Consider the ancient ages when life first crept from sea to land. In our lighter world, fins transformed into legs capable of supporting fragile bodies on shore. But under doubled gravity, that step would have been far harder. Limbs would have needed to be thicker from the beginning, bones denser, muscles more powerful just to lift small creatures against the crushing pull. The journey from ocean to land would be slower, delayed by millions of years, and when it finally succeeded, the pioneers of land would look more like squat armored beasts than the delicate amphibians we know from fossils. The story of giants vanishes here. On our Earth, certain eras gave rise to creatures of enormous size. Titanic sauropod dinosaurs, dragonflies with wings wider than a man's arm span, mammoths that roamed icy plains. None of these could exist in a doubled world. Gravity enforces a ceiling on size, and here, that ceiling is low. The greatest animals are no larger than the bison of our prairies or the bears of our forests, and even those appear massive only because of their compressed, muscular frames. The heavy Earth is not the stage of giants, but the domain of endurance creatures, each species capped in scale by weight itself. This alternate planet would have an evolutionary tempo that feels different to us. In our lighter world, creatures experimented with leaps, flights, towers of size, and speed. Many of these experiments succeeded spectacularly, reshaping ecosystems and leaving lasting legacies. But on the heavy Earth, the experiments are limited from the beginning. Only strategies of stability, compactness, and strength survive. Evolution here is not less creative, but more constrained, painting with a narrower palette of possibilities. The results are still diverse, but never extravagant. Even extinction events would unfold differently. On our Earth, impacts, volcanoes, and climate shifts wiped out vast groups of animals, paving the way for new ones to rise. In a doubled world, survival after catastrophe might favor even more compactness, driving evolution further toward conservative designs. After each reset, species would emerge shorter, sturdier, and tougher than before. The path of life bends not toward extravagance, but toward resilience. And within this framework, intelligent life eventually arises. The ancestors of humans in such a world do not walk tall across plains, but shuffle steadily across lower grasslands. They are already stocky, broad, and muscular, built for strength from the beginning. Their brains evolve not to plan hunts of great speed, but to design traps, tools, and strategies that minimize effort. Intelligence here is a necessity, because cleverness conserves energy in a world where every wasted movement carries risk. When you picture this alternate humanity, you see not only shorter, thicker forms, but also minds conditioned by gravity. These people value patience because quickness is punished. They value cooperation because moving heavy burdens requires many hands. They value caution because a single misstep brings injury that is harder to recover from. Their cultures evolve under the philosophy of endurance, with songs, stories, and rituals that honor persistence, rather than flight or conquest. Thus, the heavy Earth is not barren or lifeless, but it is slower, denser, and shaped by constant negotiation with weight. Its forests are lower, its animals sturdier, its oceans quieter, its skies emptier. Yet in that world, life still thrives, proving that even under a doubled burden, nature finds paths to survive. The true difference is not in the spark of life itself, but in the forms that spark takes under the rules of a heavier sky. And so the stage is set. Evolution has written its script under doubled pressure, creating a biosphere unlike our own. But what of the planet itself? Gravity sculpts not only biology but stone, water, and air. To step into this heavier Earth fully, we must look now at landscapes, mountains, rivers, and skies, and see how gravity reshapes the very face of the world. The ground beneath your feet is not immune to the doubled pull. Every mountain, river, and valley is shaped not only by wind and water, but by gravity's constant hand. When the pull is doubled, the very architecture of Earth changes. The landscapes that emerge are familiar in outline, but altered in scale, compressed by weight, sculpted by forces that no longer allow extravagance. Begin with mountains. On the lighter Earth, peaks like Everest rise into the sky, their summits piercing the atmosphere at more than 8,000 meters. Yet these giants exist only because Earth's crust can bear the weight of stone piled that high. Double gravity, and the stress is doubled too. The crust buckles earlier, rock collapses more readily, and the maximum height of mountains is slashed. On the heavy Earth, Everest never forms. The highest peaks are no greater than half the height of ours. Their ridges jagged, but closer to the ground. Their snowcaps lower, their cliffs more abrupt. Mountain ranges still exist, but they crouch rather than soar, pressing down into the crust that struggles to support them. Valleys and canyons are carved more quickly. Rivers rushing downhill under doubled pull cut deeper into soil and stone, their waters carrying heavier loads of sediment. The Grand Canyon of our world might have formed in less time under such conditions, but it would look different too, steeper, narrower, its walls collapsing more often under their own weight. The landscapes of erosion are sharper and more dramatic, sculpted faster and harder by the constant drag of gravity. The seas feel the change as well. Waves crash with more force, their crests collapsing faster, their spray thrown lower. Tides pulled by the moon still rise and fall, but under double gravity, the water slams with punishing weight against coasts. Cliffs crumble more easily, shorelines retreat more quickly, and beaches shrink under relentless attack. Oceans are still vast, but their motion is heavier, their rhythms slower, their power more violent. On land, soils compress more tightly. Layers that are loose and rich in our lighter Earth become compacted, holding less air, demanding stronger roots from plants. Swamps are denser, their muck heavier, their waters sluggish. Even deserts are altered, their dunes lower and harder, their sands pressed into firmer shapes that shift less easily with the wind. The geography of dryness is less fluid, more carved and locked in place. Gravity shapes ice too. Glaciers creep downhill with doubled urgency, carving valleys deeper, grinding landscapes into sharper forms. The weight of ice presses harder against bedrock, leaving behind jagged scars when it retreats. Polar regions still gleam white, but their sculpting power is fiercer, their influence on landscapes more extreme. From mountains to rivers, coasts to deserts, ice to soil, the message is the same. Gravity compresses, quickens erosion, and sets lower ceilings on height. The landscapes of this heavy Earth are not less beautiful, but they are different. They are carved closer to the ground, more abrupt, more violent, and always more constrained. But perhaps the greatest transformation lies above, in the air itself. For when gravity doubles, the atmosphere compresses, pushing clouds lower, thickening the sky, and changing the very look of daylight. To truly know this world, we must raise our eyes and see what the skies look like under a doubled weight. Mountains may crouch lower, and rivers may carve deeper, but the true scale of transformation is revealed when you look across entire continents. The doubled pull alters not only the size of features but the way landscapes connect. Plains that once stretched wide are broken more easily by erosion. Hills roll closer together, their slopes steeper, their soils thinner. The horizon looks different, not marked by towering silhouettes, but by compressed lines of stone, valleys carved sharper, and ridges that rise only to fall abruptly again. A walk across this land feels heavier, not only because of your own burden, but because the terrain itself offers no easy passage. The rivers that wind through these lands run with greater urgency. Each drop of water falls with doubled force, carrying sediment more efficiently, gouging channels faster. Floodplains are narrower, deltas more compact, their structures unable to spread wide under the heavier flow. Waterfalls, though shorter, strike the pools below with a violence that shatters stone, throwing spray that hangs dense in the compressed air. Lakes form in basins dug deeper and steeper, their waters darker, their shores sharper. The rhythm of erosion becomes a song sung in a lower, more forceful key. Volcanoes too bear the mark of gravity. The lighter earth produces towering cones, their slopes sweeping wide, their lava flows stretching across kilometers of land. On the heavy earth, magma struggles to build such structures before the weight of its own material collapses them. Cones are smaller, steeper, more jagged, erupting in bursts that carve brutal scars into nearby terrain. Lava flows are pulled faster downhill, spreading less widely, cooling quickly under pressure. The volcanic landscapes of this world are violent, but compact, power compressed, rather than stretched. Caves and underground systems also differ. The ceilings of caverns cannot arch as high before they crack. Stalactites and stalagmites grow closer together, forming cramped, dense chambers. Tunnels collapse more easily, forcing subterranean life into tighter, lower spaces. The underground world becomes a labyrinth pressed down, its mysteries constrained by the doubled ceiling of stone. Even wind behaves differently in shaping the land. Air pressed into a denser layer strikes the ground more forcefully. Sand blasting of rocks accelerates, smoothing cliffs more quickly, carving sharper edges into monuments of stone. Yet dunes remain lower, their sands heavier, shifting less with breezes and more only with gales. Dust storms are denser, their particles striking skin like grit, their clouds hanging closer to the ground. Over millions of years, the heavy earth develops a face that is rugged but compressed. Its mountains squat, its rivers carve hard channels, its deserts lock into firmer forms, its volcanoes burn in smaller bursts. Nothing is allowed to grow too tall or too wide without gravity reminding it of limits. This is a planet of shortened ambitions, where landscapes wear the mark of weight as much as bodies and creatures do. Yet in all these changes, beauty persists. A valley carved deep by a powerful river is breathtaking, even if it is narrower. A jagged peak half the height of Everest can still pierce clouds that hang lower in the sky. A storm-sculpted desert of compressed dunes glows with the same golden light, even if the shapes are smaller. The heavy earth is no less magnificent, only different. Its grandeur, defined by density and force, rather than height and expanse. But to complete this picture, we must finally turn our gaze upward, for the land is only one half of the story. The sky itself is altered by double gravity, compressed into thicker layers, pressing harder on everything below. Clouds gather differently, winds move with greater force, and light scatters in unfamiliar ways. The climate of the heavy earth is not our climate. Its weather is sharper, its storms more punishing, and its very air feels foreign. The air above the heavy earth carries the final signature of doubled gravity. Look upward, and you would not see the familiar, endless vault of pale blue. Instead, the sky seems closer, denser, pressing down as if it too has grown heavy. Clouds drift lower, their forms compacted into darker, thicker shapes. Where on the lighter earth they billow high, here they hang close to mountaintops, sometimes brushing against hills, that would never touch them in our world. The atmosphere itself is compressed. Molecules of nitrogen and oxygen are packed more tightly against the surface, creating air that is heavier to breathe and more resistant to motion. Sounds travel differently through this dense medium, carrying farther but with a muffled weight, as though the world speaks in deeper tones. A shout echoes longer across valleys. A drumbeat rumbles with more force. Thunder cracks like stone breaking in half. The music of this sky is richer but heavier, resonating through the land in ways our ears are not used to. Rain falls harder too. Each droplet weighs twice as much, striking skin with surprising sting, carving rivulets into soil more quickly, scarring leaves and petals with its assault. Storms that would drench fields in our world become destructive here, shredding plants, breaking branches, and eroding hillsides with their fury. Rivers swell faster, floods rise with greater violence, and coastlines suffer from downpours that hammer endlessly. The cycle of water is faster, more punishing, reshaping landscapes as surely as tectonic forces. Snow is no gentler. Flakes, compressed by the heavy sky, fall faster and land with greater density. A snowfall of a few centimeters weighs as much as a much deeper accumulation on the lighter earth. Roofs creak under the pressure, trees snap beneath the weight, and avalanches strike with terrifying speed. Winters in this world are not merely cold but crushing, their silence broken by the groan of collapsing branches and the roar of sliding ice. Light itself changes in a heavy atmosphere. The dense air scatters sunlight more intensely, deepening the blues of midday and reddening the hues of dawn and dusk. Sunsets stretch in long bands of crimson and violet, the horizon burning with richer fire as light bends and filters through compressed layers. Stars at night appear dimmer, their brilliance softened by the thick veil of atmosphere, while the moon seems closer, haloed by moisture that cannot rise as high as in our lighter world. Winds whip differently too. Dense air carries more energy, pressing against bodies with greater force. A gust that might push you gently in one world knocks you stumbling in this one. Storms build with ferocity, hurricanes strike with unimaginable power, their walls of wind and water battering coasts into submission. To live here is to respect the weather, for it is heavier, faster, and more dangerous than anything familiar. Yet the same density that punishes also offers protection. Meteors burn more easily in the atmosphere, torn apart by friction, long before reaching the ground. The sky acts as a stronger shield, sparing the planet from many impacts. Auroras too burn brighter, spread wider, their ribbons of light dancing lower, where compressed layers of air meet solar particles. The night sky may lack bright stars, but it glows with shifting curtains of color, an eerie beauty, unique to this heavy world. The landscapes of Earth are written not only in stone and water, but in the air itself. With doubled gravity, the very breath of the planet changes, creating a sky that is closer, heavier, richer, and more violent. To stand on this Earth is to feel not only the weight of the ground beneath, but the weight of the sky above, pressing in from every side. And yet, as dramatic as these landscapes are, they are only the beginning. The skies that hang lower, the storms that rage harder, the seas that crash fiercer, all of these shape climate and weather in ways far beyond the familiar. To step further into this thought experiment, we must now ask, how would the weather of such a planet behave? What cycles of storm and calm would rule under a doubled sky? The weather of the heavy Earth is written first in pressure. Imagine standing at sea level, where the atmosphere presses twice as strongly upon your body. Breathing becomes laborious, not only because of gravity pulling your chest downward, but because each lungful of air feels thicker, denser, harder to draw. Barometers in this world read values unthinkable to us, and storms form under conditions that exaggerate every force. The sky above is not merely a passive ceiling, but an active weight, a restless ocean of compressed gas, always on the move. Winds strike with more ferocity in such air, each molecule pulled harder toward the ground, collides more forcefully. So a breeze that would feel gentle in our lighter world becomes a push here, and a gale becomes a wall. Storms grow violent with ease, their gusts flattening crops, toppling trees, and tearing at buildings. Even walking into a headwind is exhausting, each step resisted by the thick, fast-moving air. For creatures that live here, streamlined forms and strong, low postures are essential. For the atmosphere itself is an adversary. Rain is transformed. Drops fall twice as heavy, striking leaves and soil with punishing blows. Gentle showers erode soil, and true storms gouge trenches across landscapes. Flooding becomes frequent, for ground cannot absorb the deluge quickly enough. Roofs collapse beneath torrents that feel less like water falling and more like sheets of liquid stone pounding relentlessly. Rivers rise quickly, their swollen banks overflowing into valleys, carving channels deeper and faster than ever. The cycle of erosion is accelerated, weather acting as a sculptor more aggressive than time itself. Clouds themselves form lower, compressed into denser shapes by the thickened air. They hang heavily above landscapes, their shadows darker, their presence closer. Fog is common, lingering longer as dense air resists dispersal. The boundary between ground and sky blurs, valleys filled with vapor that clings to the earth like a living weight. Skies are rarely clear, always filled with some haze or mist pressed downward by gravity's grip. Snow changes character as well. Each flake descends quickly, compacted by the denser air, and accumulates into layers that weigh down forests and villages. Winter storms are catastrophic, not gentle blankets of white, but crushing assaults that break branches, collapse roofs, and immobilize entire regions. Avalanches roar down mountainsides with doubled urgency, their mass moving faster, striking with devastating force. To survive such winters, creatures evolve thick, powerful limbs to trudge through heavy drifts, while human societies would design homes with slanted roofs, strong enough to shed the burden of snow before it destroys them. Thunderstorms, already dramatic in our world, reach terrifying scales. Lightning flashes brighter against the compressed sky. Thunder booms deeper and longer, rolling across landscapes with echoes that rattle bones. Hailstones form more readily in thick clouds and fall heavier, smashing crops and shattering glass. A storm that is considered severe in the lighter earth is routine here, and the truly great tempests leave entire regions scarred. The climate overall tilts toward extremes. Summers are hotter at the surface because heat is trapped closer to the ground by the compressed air. Winters are colder because denser atmospheres shed warmth more efficiently at night. Seasonal cycles swing wider, and creatures must adapt to more punishing conditions year after year. The very rhythm of life, migration, reproduction, and harvest is reshaped by the violence of climate. Yet for all its harshness, this weather brings beauty too. Sunsets linger longer, their light scattering more richly through the dense air, painting skies with fiery reds and deep purples. Rainbows curve closer to the ground, their arcs sharper, their colors brighter. Auroras ripple in curtains that glow lower, their light filtered through layers thick enough to turn night into shimmering twilight. The sky of this world is not merely dangerous, but breathtaking, a constant theater of light and shadow. But as much as the heavy Earth's weather dazzles the senses, it also limits possibility. Creatures, plants, and people alike must always respect it, always adapt to it. For storms in this world are not nuisances, but existential threats. And when we consider not only weather but the pursuit of technology, flight, architecture, and exploration, we begin to see how doubled gravity places barriers that civilizations must struggle to overcome. The heavy atmosphere does more than sculpt landscapes. It drives a climate that feels alive with violence and weight. Seasons here are not gentle transitions, but upheavals. Summer air holds heat closer to the ground, baking soil until it cracks, while winter storms descend with snow and ice so dense they feel like stone falling from the sky. Between these extremes lie brief, turbulent springs and autumns, filled with floods, tempests, and winds that test the endurance of everything living. Creatures adapt in remarkable ways. Birds that might have flown in our world cannot survive here, but smaller animals learn to burrow against storms or cling to low vegetation that bends but does not break. Plants evolve waxy coatings to resist the assault of heavy rain, and roots grow deeper to withstand floods. Life bends, never without cost, but always searching for survival in the cracks of a hostile climate. For humans, such weather rewrites the very rhythm of civilization. Crops fail easily in years of storms, so farming shifts to enclosed valleys, terraces, or even sheltered domes, designed to protect against the sky's wrath. Cities cluster where winds are weakest, often in basins or behind mountains that act as shields. Architecture evolves to deflect storms, with rounded roofs, sloped walls, and foundations anchored deep in bedrock. Survival depends on understanding the atmosphere, reading its moods, and designing lives that do not challenge it, but yield to its power. Travel is limited. Roads are washed away by swollen rivers. Ships capsize in seas, whipped by hurricanes, and flight itself is nearly impossible. The weather enforces isolation, slowing the spread of ideas, trade, and empires. Cultures remain more regional, shaped by the particular tempests of their climates. In one valley, rituals form around winter avalanches, while across the sea, another society builds myths around the summer storms that flatten their fields. Weather becomes not just a backdrop but a central character in the story of humanity. Yet for all its dangers, the sky of the heavy earth offers beauty unmatched. Sunsets stretch in glowing fire across compressed horizons. Lightning illuminates entire valleys in veins of white fire, and auroras shimmer lower, painting hillsides in curtains of green and violet. The people of this world live under skies that terrify and inspire, skies that teach humility before power greater than themselves. And as we look up, we must also look outward. For in a world where storms roar louder and winds press harder, technology itself is reshaped. The heavy sky does not merely test creatures and civilizations, it sets boundaries on invention. To explore this world fully, we must now ask what limits gravity imposes on machines, structures, and the dream of reaching beyond Earth itself. Storms in the heavy world do not fade quietly into memory. They leave scars. Hillsides stripped bare by torrential rain, forests broken by hurricane winds, coastlines bitten back by waves that strike with the weight of stone. Recovery is slower too. Soil erodes quickly, but replenishes slowly. Plants grow with difficulty in compacted ground, and animals require more energy to forage in environments scoured again and again by violent weather. Climate here is a constant contest, and survival is always temporary, always hard-earned. The cycle of water takes on a sharper rhythm. Clouds, compressed and low, release rain in sudden furious bursts, rather than long, gentle showers. Rivers surge unpredictably, drying to trickles in heat, then roaring in floods at the next storm. Droughts and deluges alternate in extremes, forcing life into strategies of endurance rather than growth. Crops fail in exposed fields, and only those sheltered by stone terraces or domed enclosures can reliably yield food. Human societies that thrive here are those that learn to bend to the cycle, storing in times of plenty, conserving in times of ruin. Winds also redraw the possibilities of movement. Sailing across oceans, so vital in our world's history, becomes perilous. Dense air pushes harder on sails, storms capsize ships with greater ease, and waves pulled by double gravity strike with relentless force. Trade by sea remains limited, confined to sheltered coastlines, while inland societies develop more slowly, isolated by the ferocity of travel. The world remains fragmented, cultures developing separately, each one carved by its particular climate. The psychological toll of living under such skies is immense. To hear thunder that shakes stone walls, to feel rain that bruises skin, to watch entire harvests washed away. Such experiences shape cultures deeply. Myths grow from the atmosphere itself. Gods of storm and sky dominate religions, while festivals of endurance mark survival after tempests. The weather is not simply feared but worshipped, for in this heavy earth it is the single most powerful force in daily life. And yet, there is wonder. The compressed air creates sunsets that burn longer and more vividly, colors scattering through the sky in shades that would look impossible to us. Double rainbows arch lower and brighter, their hues more saturated against darker clouds. Auroras ripple closer to the ground, their curtains of green and violet seeming almost within reach. Even storms, as terrifying as they are, inspire awe when lightning veins across the heavens in a display that feels divine. The weather of the heavy earth is harsher, faster, and more destructive, but it is also more dramatic, more alive, a stage of constant spectacle. To live here is to endure storms not as occasional trials, but as the defining rhythm of life. Survival is possible, but only for those who learn to respect the doubled weight of sky and season. And if the weather itself is this violent, what of human invention? How does a species bound to Earth find ways to defy a gravity so powerful? The next part of our journey asks whether technology can rise at all in such a world, and if it can, what shape it must take. The dream of human invention has always been about defying nature. We built fire to resist cold, wheels to outrun distance, and engines to outpace muscle. But in a world of doubled gravity, every invention is tested against a force that drags twice as hard on stone, wood, metal, and flesh. Technology here is not only about cleverness, it is about survival in a universe where gravity rules without mercy. Begin with architecture. On the lighter Earth, towers climb into the sky, bridges span rivers, and cathedrals stretch upward in defiance of stone's own weight. In the heavy world, every structure collapses sooner under doubled pressure. Beams bend faster, supports snap more easily, and foundations sink deeper into compacted soil. Builders must design squat, wide forms, with low ceilings and thick walls, shaped more like fortresses than spires. Vaulted arches and slender steeples never appear. Instead, the skyline of a city is one of compressed strength, a horizon of domes, pyramids, and flattened tiers. The very idea of vertical ambition is forbidden by gravity. Machinery suffers too. The wheel, one of humanity's earliest tools, becomes harder to use when every cart, barrel, and axle bears twice the load. Horses and oxen, already strained by their own bodies, cannot pull carts filled as heavily. Roads crumble more easily under such burdens, and wagons splinter on journeys that once were simple. Over time, people learn to make smaller loads, shorter trips, and stronger wheels. But progress is slowed by constant collapse. Flight, however, is the greatest casualty. On our Earth, the Wright brothers lifted their plane into the sky by generating enough lift to overcome gravity. Here, the weight of engines, fuel, and passengers doubles instantly. Wings must be twice as large, engines far more powerful, and fuel demands impossibly high. The dream of flight is crushed before it begins. Birds themselves rarely fly, and machines are no more fortunate. Human imagination still yearns for the sky, but in this heavy world, the sky is an unreachable ceiling. Rockets face an even greater barrier. To leave Earth requires escaping its pull, and in this world, the energy required is multiplied. The amount of fuel needed is so immense that no practical rocket can ever be built. Even if one could rise, its payload would be minuscule, its efficiency destroyed by the doubled demand. Space remains forever out of reach. The stars, the planets, even the moon are distant lights, visible but untouchable. Humanity is forever bound to the ground beneath their feet. Energy itself becomes more precious. Engines that push carts, trains, or ships consume twice the fuel for the same journey. Windmills and water wheels strain under heavier materials, their gears breaking more often. The steam engine, so pivotal to our lighter Earth's industrial revolution, may never have emerged here. Coal must be hauled at doubled weight, pistons must push against doubled friction, boilers must withstand doubled stress. Progress limps forward, not in leaps of innovation, but in slow increments of endurance. Tools, weapons, and armor all reflect the same pattern. Swords are shorter and thicker, shields are heavier, bows lose their reach because arrows fall quickly from the sky. Armor that once protected warriors now burdens them into collapse, forcing societies to abandon heavy gear for lighter fabrics. Warfare is fought with close, crushing weapons, not with elegant spears or distant arrows. The shape of technology is grounded, restrained by the invisible hand pressing down. Yet this is not a story without hope. Humanity is endlessly resourceful, and in this doubled world, invention does not vanish, but transforms. Buildings are built wider, roads are reinforced, and tools are redesigned for compactness. Ships are shorter and sturdier, plowing through heavy seas with determination. Energy is redirected not toward flight or rockets, but toward efficiency of life on the ground. Progress is slower, but it does not stop. The heavy world forbids certain dreams, but it fosters others. Perhaps these people develop new ways of harnessing subterranean heat, of shaping metal into denser alloys, of conserving energy in forms our lighter world never discovered. Where ambition is limited by gravity, cleverness is redirected into endurance. But one truth remains unshakable. In this doubled world, humanity cannot rise freely into the skies, cannot break free of its planet, cannot build the towering cities of our history. Gravity does not only weigh down bodies and landscapes, it weighs down possibility itself. And if technology is slowed, then history too is reshaped. Civilizations do not climb as quickly toward industry and expansion. Their stories are written at a different pace. Under a heavier hand, their destinies turned by the force beneath their feet. The inventions of the heavy earth evolve not as leaps into the future, but as careful negotiations with weight. Every machine, every tool, every building must pay tribute to gravity, and the cost is high. Consider the dream of transportation. In our lighter world, carriages, trains, and later automobiles carried us across continents. In the doubled world, each wheel grinds harder against soil, each axle bends more quickly, each horse collapses under doubled loads. Steam engines strain to haul their cargo, consuming twice the fuel, breaking rails and splitting wooden ties. Even with iron and steel, locomotives crawl slowly, their progress limited not by design alone, but by the implacable pull of Earth itself. Ships fare no better. On seas already wilder, with heavier waves and denser winds, vessels must be compact and reinforced. Masts cannot rise high, sails cannot stretch wide, and hulls are built shorter and deeper to resist collapse. Long voyages are dangerous, not only because of storms, but because supplies themselves weigh too much to carry far. Trade across oceans becomes rare, confined to coastlines, while inland societies remain isolated, their technologies advancing along separate, uneven paths. Weapons reveal the limits most vividly. Arrows fall short, their flight paths drag down, while catapults and trebuchets break under their own tension. Even gunpowder weapons, should they emerge, would be constrained. Bullets fall quickly from the air, their range short, their accuracy poor. War becomes not the art of distance, but the brutal test of strength at close quarters. Heavy clubs and axes dominate. Armor is lighter out of necessity, and battles are decided by endurance rather than speed. Energy itself becomes the most precious resource. Windmills turn sluggishly in heavy air, gears breaking from the strain of dense motion. Water wheels churn powerfully but wear down faster, their parts eroded by the increased force of falling water. Steam engines, when finally invented, burn coal at alarming rates, their pistons buckling under doubled stress. The march toward industrialization is delayed by centuries, slowed by failures and collapses, each success requiring double the reinforcement and double the fuel. Yet humanity adapts. Metalworking advances toward denser alloys, crafted for strength more than elegance. Tools are compact, not sprawling. Roads are built not to stretch far, but to last under relentless strain. Domes and arches, shaped to distribute weight, become the dominant architectural language, while stone pyramids and terraced structures stand as the highest expression of ambition. Progress exists, but it is thickened, slowed, and made cautious, a mirror of the people themselves. The dream of flight remains the greatest absence. Generations may dream of wings or balloons, but the dense air and doubled pull deny it. Lighter-than aircraft could lift briefly, but their envelopes must be massive, their structures unwieldy, and they collapse under storms. Humanity remains bound to Earth, its imagination forced to seek other directions. Instead of reaching the skies, people turn downward, digging mines deeper, carving caverns into hillsides, and mastering the underground. The heavy world encourages not height but depth, not ascent but endurance. And so technology in this world is not about conquering but about surviving. Inventions are measured by how much burden they remove, how much strain they ease, how many hands they spare from collapse. Civilization advances, but always within gravity's cage, always reminded that certain dreams, flight, space, towers, and speed belong to another Earth, not this one. But if technology is slower, so too is history. Civilizations rise and fall under the shadow of weight, their ambitions pressed closer to the ground. The story of humanity itself is retold, unfolding not as our history did, but as a different timeline, one written by doubled gravity. The path of technology on the heavy Earth reaches its sharpest limits when humanity dares to test the skies. Even if generations of inventors refine engines, strengthen alloys, and stretch the science of lift, the simple arithmetic of gravity remains merciless. A machine that might rise gracefully in our lighter world here demands wings too wide to support their own weight, or engines that consume more fuel than can be carried. Balloons filled with heated air or lighter gases may hover briefly, but the envelopes are colossal, fragile, and easily torn by storms in the dense atmosphere. The dream of aviation survives only in myth, in stories told of creatures that might once have flown. The same barrier stands against the greater dream of space. To leave Earth requires reaching a velocity fast enough to break free from its pull, and in this doubled world, that threshold is far beyond what chemistry can provide. Even the mightiest rockets, should they ever be conceived, would collapse under their own fuel load before they could clear the ground. The moon remains an untouchable light in the night sky, the stars mere pinpricks in a dome that feels both near and unreachable. Humanity is locked to the soil forever, an earthbound species in the truest sense. Yet the denial of flight and space does not erase ingenuity. It redirects it. Energy is harvested not for rockets, but for machines that lighten daily burdens. Perhaps advances in hydraulics and pulleys become central, systems of counterweights and gears, turning into the heart of civilization. Architecture grows horizontally, with sprawling complexes designed to endure storms and house communities safely. The focus of invention is never escape, but adaptation. Even entertainment and art carry traces of this mindset, celebrating strength, balance, and resilience, more than speed or ascension. Transportation remains bound to land and sea, but innovation continues within those confines. Trains evolve as powerful, slow beasts of steel, crawling steadily across reinforced tracks. Ships develop broader hulls and internal bracing to resist the punishing seas. Roads are made of stone, layered thick to withstand centuries of crushing weight. And carts are designed with smaller wheels, and denser frames. None of these technologies move quickly, but all of them endure, serving not for grandeur, but for survival. And perhaps this is the most important truth of all. The heavy earth strips humanity of certain dreams, but grants it others. By denying the possibility of flight, it ensures a civilization more focused on stability. By closing the path to space, it keeps eyes turned inward, toward Earth itself. By making every invention a battle against collapse, it teaches patience and persistence. In our lighter world, we measure progress by how far we rise. In the heavy world, progress is measured by how well we endure. But technology and endurance are only half the story. If the burden of doubled gravity slows invention, it also reshapes history itself. From the first villages to the rise of empires, from the myths of gods to the clash of armies, the narrative of humanity is rewritten under this doubled weight. To understand this alternate world fully, we must now look back and imagine how history itself would unfold when every step, every war, every building, and every dream is made heavier. The story of humanity under doubled gravity begins in the earliest villages, where survival itself is slower, harder, and more fragile. On the lighter Earth, people rose from scattered bands of hunter-gatherers into farmers and builders, gradually bending the land to their will. But in this heavy world, the very first steps are harder. Hunting is less about pursuit, for no one can chase prey over long distances. Instead, early humans learned to trap and ambush, relying on patience and cleverness rather than speed. Spears are shorter and heavier, bows weak and limited, and battles with large animals rare because even carrying their meat is exhausting. Farming emerges later and under stricter limits. Heavy rains flatten crops, and soils pressed tightly by gravity make planting more difficult. Early agriculture begins in sheltered valleys, where rivers deposit rich sediment, but where storms are somewhat tamed by surrounding hills. These first farms are smaller, slower to expand, and always in danger of being washed away by sudden floods. Civilization grows cautiously, never straying far from the security of natural shelters. Architecture reflects the same caution. Mud brick walls rise thick but low, never more than a few meters high. Roofs are sloped steeply to shed the weight of rain or snow, but interiors are cramped and dark. Monumental construction, so central to our own early civilizations, is rare. No pyramids tower over deserts, no ziggurats stretch toward the sky. The greatest symbols of power are instead sprawling complexes of stone, their strength horizontal rather than vertical, their beauty expressed in endurance rather than height. Warfare is altered too. In our history, cavalry transformed the art of war, granting speed and mobility to armies. On the heavy earth, horses are stocky, slow, and unsuited to carrying armored riders. Cavalry never rises as a dominant force. Battles are fought face to face. Warriors armored lightly, wielding crushing weapons designed for brute force. Arrows rain only short distances, catapults crack apart under strain, and sieges are decided not by towering machines, but by starvation and attrition. Warfare in this world is less about maneuver and more about endurance, less about speed and more about patience. Religion and myth absorb the weight of this environment. In our lighter world, gods are often imagined as beings who soar above the sky or who descend from the heavens. In the heavy world, divinity is associated not with flight, but with heaviness itself. Gods are imagined as massive beings, pressing down upon earth, their presence felt in every storm, every avalanche, every crushing flood. Ceremonies honor resilience, not ascension, and prayers are whispered not for freedom from gravity, but for the strength to endure it. Trade networks develop more slowly. Heavy loads are difficult to transport. Storms destroy ships, and mountains block routes that are too exhausting to cross. Cultures remain more isolated, their languages diverging more deeply, their technologies advancing unevenly. Empires are rare and fragile, their expansion limited by the inability to carry supplies far or fast. Instead of vast kingdoms stretching across continents, the heavy earth is a patchwork of small, enduring communities, each shaped by its own climate and terrain. Yet history does not stand still. Over centuries, these societies developed their own forms of brilliance. They carved terraces into mountainsides, reinforcing them to resist erosion. They build domes that withstand storms, canals that channel floods, and machines of stone and metal that distribute loads with astonishing efficiency. Their progress may be slower, but it is not absent. Civilization advances along different lines, trading speed for resilience, distance for depth, height for strength. The heavy earth shapes not only the rise of villages and cities, but the course of empires, wars, and cultures. The timeline of humanity is stretched differently, and its milestones carry different meanings. To see this fully, we must follow history forward, watching as ambition collides again and again with the doubled weight of the world. As centuries pass, the heavy earth forges civilizations with ambitions as strong as stone, yet every ambition is compressed by the pull beneath their feet. The great cities that rise are not marked by soaring towers, but by wide, low structures, their walls layered thick against storms and floods. Market squares are roofed with domes of stone to withstand rain that falls like hammers, and streets are paved to prevent erosion from relentless torrents. Life clusters tightly, not in vertical neighborhoods, but in horizontal sprawls that hug the ground like fortresses. Trade expands, but cautiously. Caravans crawl across landscapes, their loads limited, their journeys short. Goods move slowly between regions, and each culture develops distinct traditions, isolated by geography and weather. Where our world saw great empires stretching across continents, here the heaviest burden is not an enemy's sword, but the weight of distance itself. Power is local, authority limited, and alliances are fragile. The dream of conquest falters when armies cannot march far without collapsing under their own supplies. Wars are fought, yet they look nothing like the sweeping campaigns of our lighter world. There are no thunderous charges of cavalry, no long arcs of arrows filling the sky. Instead, battles are brutal contests of endurance. Warriors clash with heavy weapons, fighting at close range until exhaustion and gravity decide the outcome. Fortresses, designed low and thick, are nearly impossible to breach, so sieges drag on for months, decided more often by famine or disease than by assault. Victory comes not through speed, but through stubbornness, not through brilliance of maneuver, but through outlasting the enemy. Philosophy and art reflect these realities. In our history, thinkers often dreamt of transcending the world, of rising to the heavens, or imagining souls as weightless. On the heavy earth, philosophy centers on burden and endurance. Myths celebrate heroes who carry impossible weights, gods who hold mountains on their backs, and spirits that embody the heaviness of existence itself. Art is carved deep into stone, with figures squat and powerful, their forms grounded rather than uplifted. Music echoes with heavy drums and deep chants, sounds that resonate in dense air, vibrating in bones like the pulse of gravity itself. Religion grows not around ascension, but around survival. Temples are squat, strongholds built to endure floods and winds. Worship is less about reaching upward to a distant sky and more about holding firm against the world's weight. Priests speak of patience, persistence, and the sacred strength of those who withstand the storms. Festivals honor not freedom but endurance, marking the end of winters survived, floods endured, and harvests gathered despite destruction. The very language of faith is rewritten by the doubled pull of Earth. Despite limits, progress continues. Scholars develop mathematics not to reach the stars, but to measure the pressures of stone and water, to calculate stresses in beams and arches, to design machines that distribute loads more efficiently. Astronomy is practiced, but the heavens are distant and unreachable, objects of awe rather than destinations. Science bends inward toward Earth itself, studying soil, storms, metals, and minerals with obsessive care. Curiosity persists, but its direction is shaped by necessity, always focused on what lies beneath feet, rather than above heads. By the medieval age, the heavy Earth hosts civilizations that are resilient but fragmented, brilliant in adaptation but cautious in ambition. Their histories are written less in expansion and more in persistence. Wars, famines, floods, and plagues still come, but cultures endure, hugging valleys and plains, bound not by conquest, but by survival. The weight of gravity has slowed their steps but not extinguished their will, and so the question emerges: if humanity on this earth continues into an industrial age, how would that age unfold? Would steam and iron spark revolutions as they did in our world? Or would the doubled burden crush the engines of progress before they can transform society? The heavy earth eventually reaches the threshold of industry, but the path is slower, burdened by collapse after collapse. Coal is mined from deep seams, but every cart of stone weighs twice as much. Every beam supporting a tunnel is pressed harder, and every shaft risks sudden ruin. Even so, humanity perseveres, building furnaces and forging steel, though in smaller, denser forms. The Industrial Revolution, that in our world ignited empires here, smolders rather than burns, advancing in fits and starts, forever limited by the weight of matter itself. Steam engines are built, their pistons pounding against doubled resistance. They consume fuel hungrily, their gears wearing down quickly, their efficiency poor. Trains crawl across reinforced tracks, not racing across continents but moving with deliberate, heavy progress. Cities fill with smoke, yet they never sprawl upward into skylines of steel and glass. Skyscrapers are impossible. Instead, factories spread outward, their brick walls thick, their chimneys short, their windows narrow to resist storms. Industry rises, but its scale is grounded, compressed into forms, dictated by gravity. Empires of the heavy earth never rival those of our world. Ships remain vulnerable to storms, and long-distance trade is slow and risky. Colonization across oceans is rare, and wars for global domination are impossible. Power remains regional, and while nations grow strong in their valleys or plains, none can stretch far without breaking under the burden of supply lines. The great wars that scarred our history unfold differently here, not as global conflicts, but as prolonged regional struggles. Each one fought slowly, grindingly, with fewer sweeping movements and more drawn-out sieges. The 20th century, if it comes at all, does not look familiar. Airplanes never rise, rockets never fire, satellites never orbit. The dream of conquering the skies and reaching space never leaves the realm of myth. Instead, human brilliance channels itself inward. Energy research focuses on improving engines, making them more compact, more durable, more efficient. Electricity spreads through cities, powering lights, pumps, and machines that reduce the burden of labor. Medicine advances, for in this heavy world, the body suffers constant strain, and healing injuries from collapse or overwork becomes a central science. Culture, too, evolves differently. Without flight or space exploration, the imagination turns inward to Earth itself. Literature and art dwell on endurance, resilience, and the mysteries of the ground. Myths of other worlds remain, but they are symbolic rather than scientific. The heavy Earth's people dream not of leaving their planet, but of mastering it, surviving it, adapting to it. Their vision of progress is not about escape, but about persistence. Not about conquering distance, but about reducing burden. And yet, in their resilience, there is greatness. These civilizations prove that even under the most crushing of conditions, humanity adapts. They endure storms that would shatter our cities, build machines that function where ours would fail, and craft cultures that celebrate survival itself. Their history is not our history, but it is no less remarkable. As we trace this alternate human journey, we see how doubled gravity rewrites the very fabric of time. From villages to empires, from tools to industry, everything is slower, shorter, heavier, but the spark of humanity persists, glowing stubbornly against the weight of the world. The question remains, what kind of culture does such a humanity create when it must live forever under skies it cannot fly through and beneath stars it cannot reach? Culture is the mirror of existence, the story a people tell themselves about who they are and why they endure. On the heavy earth, where every step, every task, and every storm is magnified by doubled weight, culture bends toward heaviness too. It is not only buildings and tools that are shaped by gravity, but myths, art, music, and thought itself. Begin with mythology. On our earth, gods often dwell in the heavens, associated with the freedom of flight, with the sun and stars above, with transcendence. In the doubled world, divinity is imagined as weight itself. Gods are not winged beings who soar, but colossal presences who press downward, embodiments of gravity and burden. Myths tell of giants who hold mountains upon their shoulders, of deities who stride heavily across the land, their steps leaving valleys and seas in their wake. Worship is not about ascension, but about survival. Not about escape, but about enduring. Prayers ask not for wings, but for strength to carry loads, to survive storms, to withstand floods. Architecture reflects this ethos. Where we built cathedrals to lift spirits skyward, the heavy earth builds temples of endurance, squat and massive, their stones layered thick against rain and wind. Domes are sacred shapes, embodying strength, distributed evenly, while pyramids and terraces symbolize resilience. Beauty is found not in height or fragility, but in solidity. The skyline of cities is not a forest of spires, but a landscape of fortresses, their grandeur measured in thickness and endurance rather than elegance. Art is grounded too. Statues are carved with stocky proportions, celebrating powerful torsos and broad limbs rather than slender grace. Paintings show storms, floods, and trials endured, not heavenly flights or airy visions. Music resonates with deep tones, heavy drums, and chants that vibrate through dense air. Instruments are built for resonance rather than delicacy, their sound carrying weight rather than lightness. The cultural expression of this world is not ethereal, but visceral, rooted in the shared struggle against a heavy planet. Philosophy evolves differently as well. On our earth, thinkers often dreamt of transcendence, of the soul as a light thing escaping the body, of reaching beyond earth to stars and heavens. In the heavy world, philosophy emphasizes endurance, patience, and humility before forces too great to defy. Schools of thought revolve around strength through persistence, wisdom through restraint, and dignity in carrying burdens. To rise above gravity is impossible, so greatness is measured by how well one lives within it. Stories and legends are built around weight and trial. Heroes are not those who leap or fly, but those who carry, who resist, who endure. A folk tale might celebrate a farmer who bears a crushing harvest across floods to feed his village, or a mother who shelters her children beneath her body during a storm. The mythic archetype is not the conqueror or explorer, but the bearer of weight, the protector who stands firm when all else collapses. Even the daily rituals of life are colored by this philosophy. Festivals celebrate survival of winters, survival of storms, survival of floods. Songs mark the rhythm of planting and harvest. Dances stomp heavily upon the earth in unison, mimicking the shared struggle of existence. Culture is built not on the dream of flight, but on the rhythm of weight, on the reality that every life is lived under doubled pull. And yet, life continues. This culture is not joyless. It finds beauty in strength, meaning in burden, and even transcendence in endurance. Where our world imagines freedom as escape, the heavy world imagines freedom as resilience. To be free is not to fly but to withstand, not to leave but to survive, not to dream of lighter skies, but to find dignity under heavy ones. And as centuries pass, such a culture weaves itself into the hearts of civilizations. Art, myth, music, and philosophy are all shadows of gravity, echoes of the planet's doubled pull. Humanity here is no less human, only shaped by the weight of the world itself. But this raises a final question. Could such a humanity, bound by gravity and shaped by burden, ever have reached the heights of civilization we know today? Or would the heavy earth have pressed so hard that survival itself was the only culture possible? In the heavy earth, culture continues to evolve as societies grow more complex, but the threads of burden and endurance never leave its fabric. Literature, when it emerges, speaks not of transcendence or flight, but of survival in storms, of the nobility of patience, of families enduring hardship together. Poets write of rivers that carve the land with relentless strength, of mountains that loom low but unyielding, of lives pressed but never broken. Where our epics tell of heroes traveling far or reaching for stars, theirs tell of journeys survived against overwhelming weight, of triumph, not through conquest, but through persistence. Education reflects this mindset as well. Children are taught from early ages the lessons of careful movement, of conserving energy, of working together to lift what no single person can carry. Proverbs praise steadiness, warn against recklessness, and honor those who endure hardship with quiet dignity. Wisdom is not measured by clever leaps of thought, but by the ability to shoulder responsibility, to guide others through storms, to endure with patience the inevitable hardships of a heavy world. Rituals reinforce this cultural identity. Harvest festivals are not exuberant celebrations of abundance, but solemn acknowledgements of survival. Villages gather to honor not only the bounty of food, but the collective strength that brought it in under heavy rains and punishing skies. Songs are slower, deeper, built for voices that resonate together rather than soaring melodies. Dance is rhythmic and grounded, feet striking the earth in unison, a symbolic act of resilience against the pull beneath. Even games and sports evolve differently. There are no competitions of flight or speed, no contests of leaping or racing. Instead, games test endurance, balance, and cooperative strength. Teams compete to move stones across fields, to hold burdens for as long as possible, to resist collapse under weight. Athletic heroes are admired not for grace or agility, but for their ability to bear strain longer than anyone else. The very definition of victory is rewritten by gravity. Artistic imagination is also grounded. Painters focus on storms, rivers, and the density of landscapes, rather than open skies. Sculptors carve figures with muscular frames and grounded stances, representing stability and weight. Writers describe the heaviness of existence with reverence, framing it as a sacred reality that binds all creatures together. Even humor often revolves around the shared struggle of weight jokes about collapsing under loads, about trudging through mud, about the heaviness of daily chores, laughter serving as a communal relief from the shared burden of living. Spiritual practices adapt to the same theme. Meditation in this world is not about detachment from the body, but about deep connection to it, about feeling the pull of earth and finding calm within it. Prayer circles emphasize unity and collective resilience, hands linked as participants sway with the rhythm of drums that echo the heartbeat of the planet. The sacred is not imagined as distant or light, but as profoundly present, pressing down like the air itself. The culture of the heavy earth is one of gravity, not just in physics, but in meaning. Life is understood as difficult by nature, and endurance becomes the greatest virtue. Where we imagine freedom as the absence of constraint, they imagine freedom as the strength to withstand constraint without breaking. Their art, their music, their stories, and their rituals are all shaped by this truth. binding them together in a philosophy of shared burden. And yet, for all its resilience, the question lingers. Could such a culture, so grounded in survival, ever nurture the kind of daring leaps that define modern civilization? Could they dream beyond endurance to invention, beyond persistence to transformation? Or would the weight of their world forever keep them closer to survival than to progress? The heavy Earth's cultures eventually weave their values into the deepest layers of identity. Generations grow up knowing that to live is to carry weight, to endure hardship, to find dignity in persistence. These ideas spill into politics and governance. Leaders are not admired for fiery speeches or promises of expansion, but for their steadiness, their ability to guide communities through floods, famines, and storms. Authority is equated with reliability, with the capacity to stand firm when others falter. Societies that survive longest are those that place endurance above ambition. Art continues to evolve with this theme. Epic sagas, told around fires, recount not conquests of distant lands, but sagas of survival during impossible winters or floods that nearly erased entire villages. Heroes are remembered not for how high they climbed, but for how long they stood unbroken. Stone carvings depict families bracing against storms together, their forms compact and powerful, their eyes turned downward to the earth they must always face. Even the very act of carving becomes symbolic. The chisel blow against stone, echoing the struggle of life against gravity's pull. Philosophies deepen into schools of thought that treat gravity almost as a moral force. One tradition might claim that every burden endured strengthens the spirit, while another warns that resisting the world's weight is futile, and only acceptance brings peace. Debates center not on transcending the human condition, but on understanding its heaviness, on finding meaning in carrying what cannot be cast off. Where our thinkers asked how to escape the world or rise above it, theirs ask how to live fully within it. Over centuries, this culture creates a psychology different from ours. People do not dream of flying or leaving the planet, for such ideas are unthinkable. Instead, they dream of shelter, of strong foundations, of building families and communities that can weather any storm. Hope is not cast into the heavens but planted in the soil, grounded in the reality that life is heavy but still worth carrying. Yet within this heaviness lies a quiet grandeur. There is beauty in the sight of entire villages gathering to rebuild after storms, in the sound of chants that echo through valleys during festivals of endurance, in the shared laughter at burdens carried together. The culture of the heavy earth does not deny suffering but embraces it, transforming it into solidarity, into art, into meaning. Their world may not allow skyscrapers or rockets, but it does create a civilization deeply in tune with the weight of existence. And so the question grows sharper. If gravity has shaped their bodies, their tools, their cities, and their cultures, then what happens when survival itself is tested? Could humans of our world endure if Earth suddenly doubled its pull overnight? Or is adaptation only possible when evolution has prepared life for it from the beginning? Imagine waking tomorrow and finding Earth transformed. The pull beneath your feet is doubled. Every object weighs twice as much. Every step drags twice as hard. Every breath feels like a stone on your chest. Unlike the humanity that might evolve across eons on a heavy Earth, we, with bodies and societies shaped by lighter gravity, would be thrown into catastrophe overnight. The first sensation would be collapse. Muscles built for lighter strain fail to lift bodies from beds. Standing becomes an act of agony. Spines compress, knees buckle, and hearts race to push blood uphill against doubled pull. For many, circulation fails entirely. Brains deprived of oxygen, lungs struggling against the extra weight of the chest. In the first hours, countless lives are lost simply to the shock of existence under new rules. Buildings too groan under the burden, bridges sag, beams snap, and towers designed for a lighter world crumble. Skyscrapers shear downward, their own mass tearing them apart. Roads split, pipelines burst. Dams crack under the sudden doubled pressure of water. The infrastructure of civilization collapses almost instantly, not from external attack, but from gravity itself. Vehicles fail next. Cars sink deeper into roads, tires bursting under doubled loads. Airplanes, already precariously balanced against weight and lift, never leave the ground again. Trains buckle their rails, ships founder in seas where waves crash with twice the force. Within days, humanity finds itself reduced to walking short distances with immense strain, unable to rely on machines that once spanned continents and oceans. Survival becomes a desperate calculation. Food is trapped in warehouses whose shelves have collapsed. Water systems fail as pumps break under doubled loads. Electricity falters as turbines and transmission lines snap from weight they were never designed to bear. Civilization grinds to a halt, and survival reduces to endurance of the most immediate kind. For those who endure the first days, adaptation is brutal. Movement is slow, each step a battle. Tasks that once seemed trivial, lifting a pot, climbing stairs, carrying water, become trials that leave muscles burning and hearts pounding. Entire populations retreat indoors, rationing effort, conserving every motion. Communities huddle together, improvising shelters that can withstand storms in the heavier atmosphere. The greatest enemy is not only the doubled weight, but the body's limits. Hearts strain, lungs collapse, bones fracture under minor falls, joints grind themselves to ruin. Evolution gave us frames balanced delicately for one gravity, and without generations of adaptation, those frames are brittle against the doubled world. Humanity, as it exists today, could not persist long. Survival belongs only to the strongest, the most resilient, and even they face shortened lives under the crushing burden. But perhaps a few cling to survival. Perhaps some carve out new lives in valleys where storms are less violent, building shelters low and strong, adapting their routines to minimal movement. Over generations, their descendants might grow shorter, stockier, and stronger, their bones thicker, their hearts more powerful, their lungs broader. Evolution, given centuries, could sculpt a humanity that endures the doubled pull. But the transition from one world to the other, sudden and merciless, would be a catastrophe beyond imagining. And so the question sharpens to its final edge. Could we survive such a world? Not suddenly, not as we are, but slowly, across generations, with patience and endurance, humanity could adapt. Life does not vanish under weight, it transforms, it bends, it endures. Gravity may crush the unprepared, but it also sculpts survivors into new forms. The doubled Earth, whether imagined as a sudden disaster or as an alternate evolution, reminds us of a truth often forgotten. Gravity is the architect of life. It decides how tall mountains rise, how rivers carve, how hearts beat, how societies endure. If it changed, so too would everything we know. In the days following such a sudden transformation, survival becomes not a question of comfort but of raw endurance. Families who once carried groceries home with ease now find that lifting a single bag is nearly impossible. Children who once ran in play can scarcely stand. The elderly, already frail under one gravity, collapse quickly under the doubled strain. Hospitals overflow, but even their walls crack, their equipment breaks, their power flickers out as systems fail under weight. They were never built to endure. The psychological impact is immediate and devastating. A species accustomed to freedom of movement, to reaching, climbing, and building, finds itself trapped within its own limitations. People cannot reach upper floors of their homes, cannot climb the stairs of their apartments, cannot even rise from bed without agony. Panic spreads as entire societies realize that nothing, not food, not medicine, not safety, can be distributed quickly enough in a world where every motion is doubled in cost. Communities adapt in desperate ways. Neighbors pool resources, creating ground-level shelters where groups can survive together, conserving strength and sharing burdens. Routines shift to minimize effort. Movements are slow, tasks are divided, and rest becomes as important as action. Survival favors those who organize, who conserve, who think carefully about how to spend each moment of energy. Chaos reigns at first, but slowly patterns of endurance emerge. Within weeks, landscapes themselves seem to betray humanity. Rivers that once flowed steadily now surge with doubled force, sweeping away bridges and flooding plains. Storms rage heavier, their rains striking like stones, their winds pushing people to the ground. Crops flatten, and food shortages worsen. In this world, agriculture is no longer a simple act of planting, but a test of endurance against violent weather and exhausted soil. Famine looms, not as a distant threat, but as an immediate reality. Technology offers little relief. Cars and trucks collapse under doubled weight, their engines overstrained, their tires burst. Aircraft remain grounded forever, and ships founder in seas that batter them into wreckage. Even electricity falters as turbines break and power lines sag. Without machines to carry loads or move supplies, humanity is thrown back to survival with bare hands, bodies too frail to endure long, and yet, some survive. The strongest and most adaptable learn new ways of living. Villages form around natural shelters, caves and valleys that protect against storms. People grow accustomed to crawling rather than walking, to dragging loads rather than lifting them, to living within the smallest possible radius of movement. What once seemed indignity becomes necessity, and necessity reshapes culture. Over generations, biology would begin to change. Children born in this doubled world, who survive their fragile youth, would be shorter, their bones denser, their muscles thicker. Evolution favors stocky frames, wide hips, and powerful lungs. Heart and circulation adapt slowly, building resilience against the doubled pull. Generations later, a new humanity would emerge, one built for the heavy world, in a way that we, sudden visitors, could never be. But this path is long, and survival through the transition is brutal. The sudden doubling of gravity is not an inconvenience, it is an extinction event. Civilization, as we know it, collapses. Only scattered groups endure, and they do so not by conquering their world but by surrendering to its heaviness, adapting inch by inch, breath by breath, generation by generation. What remains is a humanity remade, not broken, but reforged by gravity. The heavy earth does not destroy life, it reshapes it. Survival is possible, but it comes at the cost of everything familiar. The centuries that follow such a catastrophe are marked by both collapse and transformation. The sudden doubling of gravity would wipe away much of civilization in a matter of months, but those who endure begin to lay the foundations of something new. The survivors live in scattered enclaves, small villages hidden in valleys or caves, where walls are thick and roofs low, where storms are endured rather than resisted. These early communities are fragile, yet they represent the seed of a humanity that may one day thrive again under new rules. The first generations struggle constantly. Farming is reduced to small plots tended by hand, each crop shielded from floods and winds with stone barriers. Tools are crude, designed less for efficiency than for sheer durability. Families adapt their daily lives to conserve motion. Tasks are shared, and movement is minimized. What once took minutes may take hours, but patience becomes a virtue, and endurance a necessity. Social structures evolve to reflect the new reality. Strength is no longer measured by speed or daring, but by the ability to withstand long burdens, to carry heavy loads, to endure exhaustion without faltering. Elders are revered for the wisdom of conservation, teaching younger generations how to ration strength, when to act, and when to remain still. Communities prize cooperation above all else, for no single person can survive alone in a world where every motion demands effort. As generations pass, biology begins to shift. Children born in this doubled world who survive to adulthood carry bodies that differ from their ancestors. Their bones are thicker, their muscles denser, their hearts more powerful. They grow shorter but sturdier, less likely to suffer collapse under strain. These changes are slow, measured in centuries, but they accumulate, carving a new humanity adapted to the heavy earth. In time, the memory of collapse fades, replaced by legends of a lighter world that now seems impossible. Technology, too, takes on a new shape. The inventions of the lighter world cannot be replicated, for flight and rockets are forever lost. But innovation does not cease. Instead, machines focus on reducing weight, on redistributing force, on amplifying strength. Simple pulleys, levers, and counterweights become central to daily life, refined over centuries into intricate systems. Water is harnessed with channels and mills, not for speed but for steady, enduring power. Progress remains, though it is a progress shaped entirely by gravity's rule. Culture reflects these adaptations. Myths retell the catastrophe as a moment of divine judgment, a time when the gods pressed more heavily upon humanity to test their strength. Rituals celebrate endurance, not conquest. Heroes are remembered for carrying their people through storms or surviving famines, not for exploration or expansion. Art depicts stocky forms, strong foundations, and storms endured. A philosophy of weight defines existence, binding humanity to the earth with reverence and humility. And so survival in such a world is not only possible but inevitable, though not for us as we are now. If gravity doubled suddenly, most of humanity would perish in the first days, societies collapsing under the strain. But over centuries, through endurance, adaptation, and evolution, a new humanity could rise, one built for the doubled pull of the earth. Life does not vanish under weight. It bends, reshapes, and persists. The lesson is stark but profound. Gravity decides not only the shapes of landscapes and skies, but the very destiny of a species. If it changed, everything else would follow: bodies, technologies, histories, cultures. And this brings us to the heart of our thought experiment, the truth that lingers beneath every speculation. Gravity is not simply a force, it is the silent architect of possibility itself. From the beginning of this journey, we have asked a single question: what if Earth's gravity were twice as strong? At first, it seems a simple thought experiment, but as we have walked through its consequences, the truth has become clear. Gravity is not merely a force tugging us downward. It is the architect of life, the shaper of landscapes, the silent hand that decides what is possible and what is forever denied. Imagine again that morning when you awaken to doubled weight, the ache in your chest, the weakness in your limbs, the collapse of cities around you. This is not just inconvenience, it is revelation. Every aspect of existence is tuned to the strength of gravity, from the beat of your heart to the height of mountains to the whisper of clouds across the sky. Change it, and nothing remains the same. We have seen how bodies are sculpted by the pull beneath them. Under doubled gravity, humans become shorter, thicker, stronger, their bones dense, their lungs powerful, their hearts straining, yet enduring. Animals adapt in similar ways. Plants grow lower, roots dig deeper. Evolution itself bends beneath the heavier weight, reshaping every living form. We have seen how landscapes themselves would bow to gravity's will. Mountains flatten, rivers rage with doubled force. Erosion tears, valleys wider and deeper. The atmosphere grows denser, pressing harder, scattering light differently, painting skies with colors unfamiliar to our eyes. Rain falls heavier, storms rage more violently, and the very climate becomes a constant struggle between pressure and resistance. We have seen how technology is constrained. Planes never fly, rockets never rise, skyscrapers never scrape the heavens. Machines are forced to bend to endurance rather than speed, designed to distribute loads rather than defy them. Progress is slower, more careful, more fragile, forever bounded by the burden of the earth. We have seen how history itself bends beneath gravity. Wars fought without cavalry or swift movement, empires that never stretch far, trade networks that remain local, cultures that grow distinct and isolated. Myths and religions evolve around weight and burden. Heroes defined not by flight but by endurance. Gods imagined as massive presences, pressing downward rather than luminous beings in the sky. And we have seen how culture would grow from this foundation. Art celebrating strength, philosophy teaching patience, rituals honoring survival. A humanity defined not by conquest but by persistence, not by ambition but by resilience, not by the dream of escape but by the will to endure. Finally, we have faced the most sobering truth of all. If gravity doubled suddenly in our world, collapse would be swift. Cities would fall, bodies would break, societies would crumble. Survival would belong only to the few, and even they would live in suffering. Only through generations of adaptation could humanity return to strength. Gravity is not negotiable. It cannot be cheated. It cannot be ignored. It cannot be conquered. It can only be endured. And yet within that endurance lies meaning. The heavy earth is not only a nightmare of collapse, but also a reminder of resilience. Life does not vanish under burden. It changes. It bends. It adapts. If gravity doubled, humanity might fall, but across centuries it would rise again, reshaped and remade. Gravity would not erase us. It would redefine us. So what does this tell us of our own world? Where gravity holds steady, it tells us that everything we know, our bodies, our histories, our cultures, our dreams, rests upon this single, silent constant. The pull we never notice is the foundation of possibility. Without it, there are no mountains, no rivers, no storms, no civilizations, no myths, no songs. Without it, there is no us. Gravity is not only the weight that presses us down, it is the reason we stand at all. And if Earth pulled twice as hard, our world would be unrecognizable. Gravity is not just a force, it is the foundation of possibility itself. Humanity, on this heavier Earth, would eventually learn to call its burden a truth rather than a curse. What begins as catastrophe would, across centuries, become normality and then tradition, and finally identity. Gravity is never questioned because it cannot be. It's simply island. The doubled pull becomes the silent measure against which every ambition, every invention, every story is tested. In this world, the act of walking upright is no small miracle. To carry weight is an honor. To endure storms is sacred. To survive is to triumph. Culture builds its symbols not on flight or lightness, but on foundations, on pillars that do not collapse, on lives that bend but do not break. A civilization forged in heaviness may never launch rockets or touch the stars, but it cultivates a philosophy that honors the endurance of existence. What does this alternate path reveal to us? It shows how fragile our own history is, balanced on constants we take for granted. The civilizations we know, the towers of glass that scrape the sky, the planes that cross oceans in hours, the rockets that pierce atmosphere to reach other worlds, all of it rests on the precise measure of Earth's pull. A little more, and none of it would have been possible. A little less, and our world too would be unrecognizable. The doubled world also shows us the true reach of gravity's influence. It does not only govern planets and stars, it governs dreams. It dictates whether a child grows up believing in the possibility of flight or in the nobility of endurance. It determines whether cultures imagine gods as beings who soar above the sky or as presences that press down upon the earth. It decides whether a species looks outward to the stars or inward to its own soil. Our earth is light enough to let us imagine, to let us climb mountains, build towers, and one day walk upon the moon. but it is also heavy enough to keep us grounded, to remind us of limits, to keep us tethered to the soil that feeds us. It is a delicate balance, and in that balance lies our history. The doubled Earth is not our fate, but in imagining it, we learn to see the weight we already carry more clearly. For every skyscraper that stands, every rocket that rises, every plane that soars, we owe thanks to the exact pull beneath our feet. For every myth of wings, every song of freedom, every dream of leaving Earth behind, we are indebted to a constant that has remained unchanged for billions of years. Gravity does not only bind us, it frees us by being just strong enough to hold us, without crushing us, just gentle enough to let us rise. And so, when we think of gravity, we should not think only of limitation. We should think of possibility. For the very fact that we live in a world where flight and exploration and invention are possible tells us something rare. We exist on a knife edge of balance, and that balance has shaped everything we are. The heavy Earth teaches us humility. Our Earth teaches us wonder. Together they reveal the truth. Gravity is not the enemy of life. It is the reason life has meaning at all. In the end, to imagine a world with doubled gravity is to confront how profoundly we are bound to the laws of nature. Gravity is not just an equation scribbled in a physicist's notebook. It is the quiet sculptor of our bones, the architect of our cities, the author of our myths. Every heartbeat, every breath, every step is a negotiation with the pull of the Earth. Double that pull, and humanity itself must be rewritten. On the heavy Earth, mountains lie low, rivers roar with ferocity, storms strike with crushing weight, trees crouch near the soil, animals grow compact, wings fall silent. Civilization rises more slowly, never reaching for the sky, but instead spreading outward, clinging close to the ground. Its people do not dream of flight or of leaving their planet, but of endurance, of persistence, of bearing the world as it presses down. Their art, their songs, their philosophies, all echo the same truth. Life is heavy, and to live is to endure. On our Earth, by contrast, gravity strikes a delicate balance. It holds oceans close, yet allows clouds to drift. It binds us to the ground, yet permits wings to rise, engines to lift, rockets to escape. It shapes our myths of gods in the sky, our dreams of other worlds, our ambitions to build higher, faster, farther. Without this exact weight beneath our feet, we would not be who we are. The lesson of the doubled Earth is not despair, but recognition. It reminds us that our achievements, towers of steel, journeys across oceans, steps upon the moon, are possible only because of the steady pull we barely notice. We live within a window of possibility so narrow that even a small change would erase much of what we take for granted. Gravity is not simply a downward tug. It is the boundary of the possible. And perhaps that is the final truth. To exist is always to live under weight. On one Earth, that weight might crush. On another, it might liberate. For us, here and now, it is just enough to bind us, just enough to challenge us, just enough to let us dream of rising, while never letting us forget where we come from. If Earth pulled twice as hard, our world would be unrecognizable. Gravity is not just a force, it is the foundation of possibility itself.